Okay, so news has been revealed. Nvidia has announced the arrival of an RTX 5050. It's arriving in both laptop and desktop configurations at some point in the second half of July. And it's already been hailed as a waste of sand by...
Oh
by
dear.
Steve at Gamers Nexus. $249 product, 8GB GPU. It's using a cut down processor as well, as we are kind of expecting there. I don't know what to make of this one. I'm going to take a better look at the specifications now, refresh my memory on them. But John, what do you think about this? I mean, I don't actually mind. There's got to be a certain point where, okay, this product is cheap enough that you're going to accept things like 8 GB of frame buffer memory. But, it does seem to me that we're still seeing not much gen-on-gen movement in the budget end of the market from AMD and Nvidia. Meanwhile, Intel are providing 10 GB and 12 GB GPUs at the same price or lower. It's not great for the budget gamer, is it?
No, it is still a tricky scenario right now on the budget side. My view on when you're looking at a lower budget for building a rig, I still think that going used is the best option. There is obviously a risk that somebody may have overdriven a card, but it's usually the case of somebody wanting to upgrade to the next generation. And usually the mentality when you're upgrading is to let a card go for a more reasonable price just because you want to move it. You want to get it out. You get that new card. This one, but then again, it's like they're saying what, like $249, is it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is like cheap as heck for a graphics card at this point. And when you're at that point, yeah, obviously cuts are going to be expected, and 8 GB certainly makes sense there, given the cost here. So, without actually seeing performance numbers, it's difficult to say, and I'd be very curious about what the standard performance is like without any sort of the additional niceties. But at the same time, as someone that does not mind frame generation, this could actually be an interesting product in that sense.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what it can do there, because it could theoretically in some games, like imagine this being a card that would be well suited to playing something like Doom: The Dark Ages, right? $249 bucks. That game does have a ray tracing component. Of course, that game still runs on a 2060 even, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But this is obviously going to be a better option than that, I would say. And so, yeah, for a cheaper gaming rig, it seems like the way to go at this point. Like this sort of class, it's like I have less issue with this versus like say a 5060, right?
Right.
Because the price is low enough where you're like, okay, the cuts don't really hit as hard. But again, this is just my info based purely on this announcement and some of the specs listed here. I'd be curious to see how it actually pans out in a real world scenario. And I've thought about, like, it would be fun to build like a small form factor PC at some point. Maybe when I upgrade my CPU or something and board here, I could try putting together sort of like a smaller build and put some lower spec graphics cards in there just to get a better idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the specs now. I brought them up. It does look considerably cut down from the 5060. 3840 CUDA cores go down to 2560. GDDR7 memory goes down to G6, which basically means bandwidth drops from 448 gigabytes per second to 320. And power is 130 watts. There's a drop in power there.
Yeah.
The interesting comparison is going to be the 4060, because that has more CUDA cores, 3072 versus 2560, but it's got more memory bandwidth. It uses more power. So if they can deliver 4060 performance for 249, that's, obviously we'd have preferred cheaper, right? I mean, some sort of head-to-head against the B570 from Intel, which is like 220 or something. I think the thing that we need to bear in mind is that this is quite a volatile end of the market, and MSRPs are indeed manufacturers suggested. So there's quite a lot of movement in that market. Keep an eye on the bargain forums, and you can often see that there is some, if you can go quickly, there are some good deals to be had there. But you've got to be keeping an eye on the bargain forums all the time. If this does 4060 performance for 249, I mean, that's not fantastic. I'd have liked it to be 220, but it is what it is. It just doesn't really enthuse me that much. If it's slower than the 4060, well, I suppose it would still be okay-ish for those. There seems to be this argument that's sort of wheeled out by AMD and potentially Nvidia. I haven't heard that argument yet, but the esports crowd, this product will probably work just fine for 1080p. We just have to wait and see. I mean, I will try and get hold of one. I will review it. I like cards that don't have a lot of performance because half the fun is trying to get a decent experience out of them, and often you can. Same goes for the 4060. Just have to wait and see. Waste of sand, not sure yet. But, I think the point is that Intel are bringing cards that have more performance or the same performance plus plus extra memory. Has problems of its own, of course. Oliver, thoughts on this?
I kind of don't think this will be a good card for price performance because it is priced at 250 American dollars. The 5060 is only 300 American dollars. So you're getting 66% of the shading performance for 83% of the cost. Is that really a great deal necessarily if you're looking at this end of the market?
Good point.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the thing to bear in mind, though, is that basically the lower down the market you go, and you tend to see the performance differentials close up. Going back to the last time NVIDIA did a desktop 50 class product, which was the 3050, that was an immense disappointment at the time. So, I guess I'm going into this one hopeful, but ultimately the track record for 50 class products isn't particularly great.
Yeah, one cool thing about the 3050 though, is particularly the 3050 6 gig, is that it was extremely low power, and the 3050 6 gig was actually a sub 75 watt card, so it could operate just on PCIe power. And that still, to this day, I believe, is the fastest consumer graphics card that can run just on PCIe power. Whereas this card has a 130 watt TDP.
Yes.
Which is only slightly lower than the 5060 at 150 watts, and it still requires one 8-pin power connector. Even though they could have gotten away with one 6-pin power connector, it's one 8-pin. So it is even in a small form factor context, it's still using like a very similar amount of power as the 5060. It's probably going to be using all the exact same cooler and heatsink designs as the 5060. At least that's what it seems like to me from my initial appraisal of the various models here. So I would really expect that this is not actually that interesting from an SFF perspective. It's really just like this ultra budget card, which, at this end of the market, you do have the board, heatsink assembly, etc. All those costs become a larger proportion of the bill of materials. I understand why this card is $250, not say $200, even though the price performance is not really there relative to cards that are a little bit higher up the stack. So it really does seem like a card that's not even that interesting for SFF. It's really more interesting as just an absolute bare bones entry level card, which, it could be good enough for 1080p gaming in a lot of games, especially games that aren't very VRAM heavy. For esports titles, it's probably going to do a really good job. I also think one nice thing about this card is that it is going to replace the 3050 6GB for a lot of entry level gaming, and it is going to replace cards like the 1650. And this card is a much more capable class of GPU, has much more VRAM than those outgoing cards. So at least now at the low end of the market, if you're going to advise someone to buy an NVIDIA GPU, at least you have an NVIDIA GPU that has at least 8 gigabytes of VRAM, that has the full modern feature set, that can run DLSS 4, that can run frame generation, that can run all these technologies. And maybe it won't be too fast. Maybe that 8 gigabytes of frame buffer is still a little bit limited, but at least it is like a real graphics card. Like a real graphics card that you can hold on to for a while, hopefully, with your esports titles and your older AAA and things like that. So that is at least positive, I think.
The thing is, Oliver, having visited computer shops in the US earlier this year, I actually found the real entry point for consumers. Under $100, still on store shelves, all by itself, the GeForce GT 1030.
Oh, the 1030.
The 1030 is still there. In fact, when I was there, they had no graphics cards left on the shelf that were modern, but they had a whole stack of 1030s, baby. So if you want your 2 or 4 gigabyte 1030, that is the true entry point. And you better believe it's super slim lines, ultra compact. It performs like a GTX 280 or something. But it's there.
Yeah, this would certainly be much, much, much more competent.
That is interesting
modern,
though, because I actually think that gives us an interesting point looking at the low end market, right? Like a 4 gigabyte 1030 is like around $100 or so, sometimes even more, right? For 150 more, right? You get to the 550 or the 5050. That's literally like 10 years of progress.
Yeah.
It is obviously more than double the cost, but we're still talking like pretty low cost. And it's just funny to see that you can still buy this ultra, ultra, ultra cheap card that performs like an ultra, ultra cheap card.
Yeah.
Because it is. But
you're going from a card that is only really useful for HTPC purposes and can't really run any modern game to a card that can probably run just about every modern popular game pretty well. So I think that's a big improvement for sure.
I think the 1030 is literally just a card for like people that just need video output. Their motherboard maybe doesn't have it. It's like, it's probably significantly worse than any recent integrated graphics even.
Absolutely.
There's just, going back to the 5050, there is another component to this, which is that there is a laptop version, which seems to have very, very similar specifications. And I think that's probably the more natural home for this type of product. I mean, Nvidia sell a huge amount of gaming laptops to the point where the 4060 laptop is right up there in the Steam hardware survey. So I think that's probably a more natural market for this product. But I am expecting to see the 5050 desktop reviews to be quite brutal.